Thank you so much to all of you who have joined us to speak a little bit about restoration and share with you some of the experiences that we have from the ground with our partners all over the world, from Asia to the Americas, going through Africa. It's lovely to see so many of you from all over the world. I saw Serbia and Singapore and Australia and South Africa and Rwanda and the US, Lebanon, Malaysia, Kenya, Thailand, Germany. It's absolutely lovely to be with all of you guys. So what are we going to do? I have a stellar panel here with me from the BirdLife Secretariat with Poshendra, Satyal, the Global Coordinator for Forest Policy, but also members of the partnership. We have José Luis Cartes, Pepe Cartes, the Chief Executive of the Guyra, Paraguay, and Andrés Bosso from Aves, Argentinas, who are going to be speaking about the Atlantic forest and our work there, working on restoration. We have Djibril Diallo, the Chief Executive of BirdLife in Mauritania, Nature Mauritania, who has been absolutely instrumental in helping us build up a relationship with the African Agency for the Great Green Wall. So Djibril is going to talk a little bit about how the Great Green Wall is this extraordinary opportunity to restore and bring back a lot of green to the Sahel and across Africa. And definitely, last but not least, we have Khwankhao Sinhaseni from BirdLife in Thailand, who's going to share with us an extraordinary project that we that BirdLife in Thailand BCST has been doing, recovering and maintaining a salt pan in a key part of the East Asian Australasian flyway, so we can actually have all these wonderful spoonbill sandpipers like the one that she has behind her. So why are we talking about this? Very quickly, to just as an introduction, and Poshendra is actually going to be speaking a lot more about this. You may know, and you may have heard from the webinar that we had last week, United Nations has launched the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. BirdLife truly believes that it is a time when we have to turn the tide on and tackle the crisis on nature and climate. And one of the best ways to do that is by restoring the damaged ecosystems, making sure that they are continuing to provide not only the values and services that they give to humanity, but also incredible services that they provide to biodiversity and to the regulation of our climate system. So what we wanted to do is share with you guys all of these extraordinary experiences that we have from the ground. As I said, we're going to do a tour from the global perspective with Poshendra to then moving into the regional perspective in Africa with Djibril. We're going to talk about a specific ecosystem in the Atlantic forest with Pepe and Andrés, and then we're going to bring it down to a specific salt pan in Thailand. So we're going to give you a tour around the world and show you how the BirdLife Partnership is already working on restoration. What are those effective principles that make nature restoration effective? How does it look like when it's successful? And why is it so important, not only for nature, but also for people and the role that local communities play? So with that, thanks again. As Sarah said, please use the Q&A box to share your questions. Keep telling us where you're coming from. It's lovely to see so many of you from all corners of the world. And I will, when the presentations are over, I will take back and we'll start sharing your questions with the speakers and having hopefully a great conversation about how can we make restoration more effective and scale it up so nature can come back. So with that, Poshendra, let me pass it on to you and you can take it over.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia. Hello, everyone. I will be setting the scene and give some of the key insights on a range of issues related to restoration based on our BirdLife and our partners' experience on the ground. So in terms of the restoration is one of the key priorities for BirdLife, and the launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is an opportunity to work together in the common goals of preventing, halting, and reversing the degradation of ecosystems of different types worldwide. We see that there is a great potential to develop a global restoration movement, aligning with the achievement of the climate targets of the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the proposed targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and in order to support an equitable, carbon neutral, and nature positive future. So the importance of tackling the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and societal challenges together is highlighted by the recently launched report by the IPBES and IPCC. And in that sense, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration has a 10-year vision, and then it heavily involves, or the aims to involve a number of stakeholders from international organizations and different national governments to industries, investors, local communities of different kinds, indigenous people, as well as individuals. So it also aims to build on the existing restoration initiatives, such as the Bone Challenge, Great Green Wall Initiative, Regreening Africa, and other specific ecosystem restoration based on, such as on forests, mangroves, peatlands, and coral reef. So in this webinar, we mainly focus on our own experience of undertaking conservation and restoration projects on the ground, including my own direct involvement in 2 of the forest projects, Trillion Trees and the Asia Pacific Forest Governance Project, based on which I have picked 5 key principles and best practices. So what are these key principles and best practices? So in terms of the different principles, the first principle is about focusing on achieving multiple benefits for people, nature, and climate. Then again, the aspect of the second principle is about putting people at the center of restoration planning, implementation, and monitoring. And then the third principle is about having a robust monitoring framework in order to track the progress of recovery. And the importance of scaling up and down is the fourth principle. And finally, getting the priority right. So I will go into each of these principles one by one briefly. So the first principle is about achieving multiple goals, because ecosystem restoration, when implemented effectively and sustainably, can also contribute to protecting birds and biodiversity, improving human health and well-being, increasing food and water security, delivering goods and services, as well as economic prosperity, and supporting climate change mitigation, resilience, and adaptation. So we need to aim at achieving the highest level of recovery possible, maintaining the biodiversity, biological and ecological attributes of the ecosystem that is restored to closer to the natural state. In that sense, our efforts should be in enhancing the ecological integrity and connectivity across a variety of ecosystem, whether it's terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, or marine. So we need to also focus on both the processes and the outcomes of restoration. In terms of the processes, in terms of what to do in restoration, in forest landscape restoration, for example, it has to be done in line with what we call 4Rs principle. Right trees, that is the native tree species, including rare and endangered species, in right places, that is connecting and expanding different reforested sites rather than having massing plantation out of nowhere, and involving a variety of stakeholders, right stakeholders, mainly the indigenous peoples and local communities, and also right ways, that is considering capacity, funding, and long-term sustainability. So in terms of the outcomes, we call that we need to focus on 4 Cs. What are these 4 Cs? First is we need to aim at expanding the ecosystem cover, improve the ecosystem condition, that is the biodiversity content in that particular ecosystem, and also maximize ecosystem carbon and supporting communities that depend or benefit from that ecosystem. So in that sense, the second principle is about putting people at the heart of restoration planning, implementation, and monitoring. So how can we do that? That is by applying the 3 E's principle: engaging, enabling, and empowering a variety of stakeholders, and also fully incorporating all kinds of knowledge system, including science, citizen science, local knowledge, and indigenous knowledge. So restoration has to be done with and for local people in order to make it both equitable and effective. In that sense, we need to have more meaningful participation, particularly of indigenous people and local communities. And as local communities are not homogeneous, we also need to consider the dynamics of social differentiation and the way it can impact both the processes and impacts the outcomes of restoration. So in order to ensure full and effective participation, we need to ask 3 questions. Who participates? When do they participate? Ensuring that they are participating from the beginning of the process till the implementation and monitoring. And how do they participate? That is the quality of participation. So the third principle is about having a smart and robust monitoring framework, and also incorporating adaptive management and learning throughout the restoration process. So in that sense, ecosystem restoration needs to be assessed against clear goals and objectives using SMART indicators. So by SMART, we mean specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We also need to assess the gaps between restoration commitments and implementation, including how much of the commitments and funding and resources has been realized. There are a variety of tools and methods that our partners on the ground have been using in terms of identifying and tracking the recovery process. These include, for example, the remote sensing analysis, community-based monitoring, use of smartphones, use of drones, and also mapping visualization, such as the forest loss dashboard that our partners are using, as well as some of the data and image coding tools. So the fourth principle is about scaling up and down at different scales and ecosystem types, because restoration has to be undertaken at every scale worldwide, while restoration has to be tailored for the local socio-ecological context. We need to consider larger landscapes or seascapes in order to have the transformational change that is required. So in that sense, we need to set global priorities based on cost-benefit analysis, such as benefits to nature, climate, and people. And at the same time, these have to be honed down to reflect the local realities. There is also the need to mainstream policies and governance across different scales and sectors, ensuring both the vertical and horizontal integration. And most importantly, because of the global scale, we need to scale up funding and finance. Obviously, it needs sustained investment, but in the long run, it can pay for itself. So finally, ecosystem is just part of continuum of conservation, nature-based solution that our partners are doing and advocating for. Therefore, the fifth and the final principle is about getting the priority right in terms of the series of actions we undertake. So in that sense, we need to first conserve remaining carbon and biodiversity-rich ecosystems of different types. Then we need to focus on restoring the fragmented and degraded ecosystems, ensuring ecological integrity and connectivity. This can be done either by natural regeneration or active restoration. We also need to address the drivers of ecosystem degradation and also sustainably manage non-protected ecosystems, such as the agricultural landscape. And if needed and where feasible, we also need to do planting of new trees using the 4 R's principle that highlighted before. Finally, we should also think about the longer-term sustainability in terms of capacity, finance, and legal reforms, also ensuring tenure security in order to continue the momentum of restoration, because it goes beyond the 10-year timeline that the UN decade has highlighted. So I leave there. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer some of the questions that you may have. Thank you. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Poshendra, and that was a very good overview of what is needed to that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about restoration. Thanks for that. So we're going to move to Africa, and I want to invite Djibril Diallo from Nature Mauritania and BirdLife Partner in Mauritania to tell us a little bit more about the Great Green Wall and this extraordinary initiative to turn around and restore a big chunk of Africa. Take it on, Djibril.
Thank you, Patricia. My name is Djibril Diallo, and I'm from Nature Mauritania. I'm the CEO of Nature Mauritania in Mauritania. So The plan of my presentation will go like this. We'll talk a little bit about the implementation process of the Great Green Wall Initiative, a little bit of what is the contribution of the civil society in terms of restoration, and especially the case of Nature Mauritania. I will share some words about what is Nature Mauritania, who we are, and so on. The key success element behind our restoration history. And of course, when we talk about successes, there is also challenges that I will share with you. So as I said, the Great Green Wall area has launched in the 7th Conference of Head of State Government of the Community of Sahel during the summit of Ouagadougou in 2005. This is because of, as we know, the consequences of desertification, of climate change, and so on, that really affected most of Sahelian and Saharan countries. So in June 2010, the head of state of government of 11 countries, that is Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, the green line that you can see on my screen here, they joined forces and the convention has been signed in N'Djamena, Chad. In the case of Mauritania, which hosts the headquarters of the Great Green Wall since 2014, this track covers around 100 kilometers, 48,000 inhabitants, and around 1,242 localities, which is this track that we can see on my screen also. But since then, the creation of the Great Green Wall has become a priority for civil society because, as we know, the government has cabinet policy aspect, but what is going on the ground rely on communities, especially local associations like Nature Mauritania and so on. So what has been the contribution of civil societies on this issue of desertification? I'm talking about Nature Mauritania a little bit. Nature Mauritania is a local NGO developed and IUCN partner, and his headquarters is in Nouakchott. Let's say that from 2018 to 2021, we have covered 78 hectares of land, in which 70 of them are in protected areas and 8 of them are in non-protected areas. So the process is like this. The first thing that we have to do when we think about restoration is the selection of the crop that we have to choose. It's very relevant because, as we know, yes, it's good to think about restoration, but what kind of species are we restoring? Let's be careful because any action can be harmful for the conservation. We have to be careful about the introduction of invasive species and all of that space. And I think local communities are well placed to indicate us, to tell us what species that we have to choose. The second aspect that I want to highlight in these pictures is the implication of local communities. They have to be in the heart of our activities if we want to succeed in the restoration activities on the ground. So the second aspect is about monitoring. Yes, it's good to have plants to nurseries, but without monitoring plan, we can't succeed. And the example of Nature Mauritania, the monitoring aspect is done by the team of Nature Mauritania, but also local authorities like and universities and so on. So it's a key aspect when we are talking about restoration aspect on the ground. The third aspect is about tree planting. As we know, we have to bring children in the heart of our activities, whatever we are doing in the field. It's really important because they are the future of tomorrow. These are our future president, our future ministries. So we have to bring them in the heart of our activities. And that is what we we always do when it comes to restoration and the tree planting on the ground. So what are the success behind our restoration story? As I said earlier, we recovered something like 78 hectares so far. So the success is the implication of local communities. And in this aspect, I want to highlight that it's a really important aspect, because sometimes we have different point of view when we talk about conservation. When you talk about conservation at local level, you have to be careful, because you are facing communities that are really suffering from the desertification, from climate change, from natural resources degradation, and so on. The first priority is how to get to it. It's not about restoration at first sight. So if you want to involve local communities, then we have to ensure that we have activities that can support their livelihood. So this is the first aspect that we can do. The second aspect, that the support of local authorities. As you know, we are only project managers. We come and we go. So only communities, especially local authorities, can ensure the sustainability. The third aspect that is key on the success is communication and environmental education. That is very important also. And as we are talking about site level, the engagement of the team engagement is very key, is important, because when you go to the field, especially in the African country or in the Mediterranean context, there is only old women and men that are staying on the villages. No young men is there now. We need to create conditions for them to stay. We need to convince them to stay on the villages, to develop these villages. So if you don't have an engaged team, it's difficult to get done this restoration activities done on the field. The key challenges that I'm talking about is, the first one is the human and animal resources. As we know, water is a precious resource and a very limited resource, especially in the context of Sahara. So we have very limited water sources, and these water sources are the source of process. People need it, the animal need this sources. So we have to be very careful when we are talking about restoration, how we manage between the need of communities, of animals, and all the other space. The second aspect, which is quite linked to the first one, is water scarcity, the scarcity of rainfall. When you are leading a project, sometimes time is running, so you have to be careful about how we manage because of rainfall, because restoration is really linked to the disponibility of the rain. The third one is the limit of human resources. You have to have a very good human resources to get. So the last one, not the least, is the project timeline. We need programs if we need successful restoration, and not only project which is very limited times of execution. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Djibril. That was really good. And I think everybody agrees that the Great Green Wall is an extraordinary opportunity to engage local communities, but also to make sure that we're bringing back nature to the Sahel. All right, I'm just going to remind everybody, if you have questions, put them on the Q&A session or in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Thanks so much for all of the questions that are coming in already. Let's move to the Americas. And let me give the floor to Pepe Cartes, the Chief Executive of Guyra, Paraguay, who is going to speak with Andrés Bosso from Aves, Argentinas, about the great work that these guys are doing in the Atlantic forest. Pepe, take it on.
Thank you, Patricia, and hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all my partners all around the world. So let me share my screen. I want to talk about the experience in the Atlantic forest. You know, the Atlantic forest is a humid forest that is shared between Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, and a little piece of Uruguay also. But from 2003, we are buying lands in the San Rafael area, if you see the polygons with yellow borders, they are all our lands, and the former landowners of these properties, they have used some part of the forest. So we have a lot of patches that need recovery works. So from 2008 or 2009, we are working about restoring the Atlantic forest in those areas. No? So you can see there are a lot of small up to medium patches of forest that have been cleaned for house crops. And right now, at this moment of the beginning of the works, they were fallow, no? So we began this process with tree planting. We select a list of species of trees that we plant in those areas. But we have a lot of pressure. We have a lot of pressures because the San Rafael area is like a paper park, and there are a lot of illegal activities, illegal from logging, from illegal crops, Mary Jane crops, some kind of different illegal activities, and the people are not very happy with us. And for that reason, they put a lot of fires, especially in the savanna. This area are natural savannas. So you can see here how the fire is entering in the restoring plot. And this is the worst recovery area. No? But there are others very, very successful areas like this. This is a 6-hectare plot surrounded by natural forests, and also was a fallow. But at the beginning in 2008, it was completely invaded by a native fern. The pteridium fern is a very terrible plant because have 1.5 meter high. And we try to control with chemical control, with natural agricultural lime, no? To change the pH of the soil. But finally, the soil seed bank of a pound was the best option to recover, because this pound grows very fastly and cover. You can see here are the ferns, the part of the ferns that, and in this situation, we have some planted trees, and the growing mbocaya palm. You can see on the back an adult mbocaya. And right now, this is the current situation. In the same plot, you can see it's a very, very covered by this palm, and also the proper trees from the forest that are growing in between those palms. So right now we are working, you know, also with neighbor communities, trying to develop best alternative to illegal activities. And one of the best option is the yerba mate program. The yerba mate is a plant. I am drinking here my yerba mate, you can see. And it's a plant, it's like a tea. And we promote the organic and share growth yerba mate. And for that reason, also, these same restoration techniques are very useful for this program. And so we are publishing, we have published a manual for restoration, and also capacity workshop for our people in the surrounding area. So I wanna not to extend too much because Andrés talk a lot. You can see, and I wanna talk about some conclusion, important conclusion, that the forest trying to restore very, very fastly itself. So the natural way is very important. And for that, it's also very important to understand the ecosystem. So we need to identify what are the pioneers plants that we can use in a first stage of this of the recovery of the forest. But there are a lot of limiting factors, and in our case specifically, all the limiting factors are based on social conflicts. So we need to address and we need to control the social issues, because there are a lot of fires and other kind of pressures that not allowed to restore very, very easy. In some patches, we have not any success because this reason. So next steps are very challenging. Here where we were talking about scaling up, and we have the same problem because we need to recover other areas and also to introduce animal restoration with a second stage, in a second stage. And agroforestry and restoration are inseparable friends. So we are using the same techniques for different objectives, not to recover the natural forest and to improve the agricultural crops in the surrounding area. So that's all for my part. So many thanks to all you. And I am here to answer your question if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pepe, and keep enjoying your lovely mate. Okay, Andrés.
Yeah.
From the other side.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I will talk about the Atlantic forest in Argentina, and it's a pleasure for me to share the screen with all my colleagues and friends. We are talking about Misiones Forest that is in the center of Paraguay and Brazilian. I have to remind you that at the moment we have 8% of the Atlantic forest left in the world. Fortunately, in the portion that belongs to Misiones province, we have 40% of the Atlantic forest left. No? Not only primary, secondary forest too. It's a landscape that seems like an endless rainforest, very well known by the Iguazu Falls that is shared between Argentina and Brazil, where the movie The Mission was filmed, for example. It is 3 million hectares with an astonishing biodiversity in our province. You can see some slides of birds and some mammals. And one of the things going to the bone, going to focus in restoration, one of the interesting things that we have in Argentina is that we have an official map for restoration. This map was launched by the Ministry of Environment, and of course it belongs to the Misiones province that comprise the Atlantic forest in our country. And you can see, for example, the sites of very high priority and high priority and media priority and low priority for restoration. This map was designed following the optimum landscape for the shower in our province. So we have a roadmap that is interesting and is official. I'm going to share with you 2 examples of the work that we are doing on the ground. 2 sites, one in a high priority and one in the very high priority sites. Go for the first one, that it's a private place. It is called Curindí. I enjoy very much the presentation of Poshendra, and we are trying to fulfill the 4 R's, the 4 C, and of course, perhaps in the future, the 4 E. This is a private place, so we have a right stakeholder that is willing to restore the landscape. It's a mosaic that includes pine forest, yerba mate crops, and of course, forest, secondary and primary forest. But there are some places to restore. This is a 4-hectare place took by a drone, and the work that we have done here is to mark lines for restoration in a place that is called in our language capoeira. So in this place, all the lines that you can see are being planted by native plants, of course, and since 2 years ago, where our Atlantic forest started, and we have some good results. In this area, we develop monitoring of plants and birds as a baseline to work every year with those indicators. This work inspired us the launch of this. I can show you, I think, yeah. It's a guide of restoration, supported by the Shenzhen Foundation that support our program. And these photographs are key stakeholders of our program. This is a restoration guide for Atlantic forest at small scale. And you can see the Ministry of Ecology, researchers, mayors of cities, landowners, botanists. So it's an interesting stakeholders that are supporting our work. Moreover, we are using the yerba mate, as José Luis Pepe, our friend, said. What is yerba mate? I can show you a mate that is a typical beverage that we drink every day and is exported all over the world. It's a native plant, so it's used for restoration. This photo shows us an organic plantation that is in the same place. So we have restoration, rainforest conservation, and organic plantation, trying to of course, support the livelihoods. And it's not only in the open sky. We are promoting as Guyra, Paraguay, to the shade-grown yerba mate in this same area. This initiative inspired us to develop our seal that is called Ka, that in Guarani name is it's forest or plant. In Spanish is the bird-friendly crop. So we are developing a seal and exploring links with companies, yerba mate companies, to develop this initiative that is trying to preserve the same surface that people is using in the yerba mate organic way. Another example is the Green Bridge. Look at this place. It's a peninsula of Argentina that goes inside the Iguazu National Park in Brazil. And this is the Iguazu National Park in Argentina. This is a private place. And in this Green Bridge, Aves Argentinas is a centennial organization, but its first nature reserve, thanks to the fourth program of BirdLife International. So we have a place where we are working in the heart of the Atlantic forest and trying to develop those techniques. In this area, sorry for the slides, and the landscape, it's a wonderful place. In this area, we are now planning the restoration approach. So in this site, we have 17 hectares to restore with our own nursery tree that was created last month. So tomorrow we are going to go to visit the area. I am in Iguazu at the moment. So we are trying to develop this initiative on the ground and then to expand to the rest of the peninsula, because this place is a 6,000 hectares that try to link. This is why it's called the Green Bridge, the national park in Brazil and in Argentina. So that's our enthusiastic project to restore rainforest and to be part of this restoration family. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Andrés. And I think this Green Bridge is actually helps us with one of the questions that we have from Mika in terms of prioritizing those sites that help us through the restoration connect forest that is still standing or ecosystems that are still standing. But we're going to talk more about that on the Q&A session. Thanks again for taking the time to be with us today. For those of you who are participating and you want to engage in the conversation, place your questions on the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. I'm going to invite now King Min from our partner in Thailand, the Bird Conservation Society of Thailand, BCST, to tell us a little bit more about Paktale and the wonderful, wonderful habitat that this is for spoonbill sandpipers and other migrants on the East Asian Australasian flyway. King Min, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I know how hard for my name for everyone to call me. Yes, as you know, my name is Kim Im, and today I would like to bring you to another part of the world, to Southeast Asia. And our project is quite different after you see many green, beautiful forests. Now we will focus on the coastal area. And this project is about the salt pan habitat restoration for the shorebird in Thailand. And this project specifically in the area that we call Pak Tale Nature Reserve. Pak Tale is Thai word. Pak is mean mouth and Tale is the sea. Now you will remember me, it's the mouth of the sea because I talk a lot. All right. Now I would like to show you about where we from. We are in the part of Thailand and you can see the red star here. And this is in the part of the Gulf of the Thailand. This is specifically in the Phetchaburi province, and Pak Tale is a part of this area. And we also realized this area is the flyway of the East Asian Australian flyway. So that's why from this information, we quite know like this area is very important in case of about the shorebird and immigration bird. So, but anyway, once we're thinking about that, of course, the first thing that we try to do, because we are the birder, we explore the area, and this is quite a beautiful coastal area. But majority of the landscape is about the salt pan. I would like to give you some basic information about the salt pan. This salt pan is, they use quite a traditional way. It means they try to direct the seawater into different ponds. And they use the solar energy to evaporate that. And they get the products, the salt from that. That means the process is very simple. And that means in the pond, it's less chemical usage. So that means like this area can be a part of the artificial pond that the shorebirds can use. And then we also see some evidence. We found many birds that are roosting, foraging in this site. But anyway, we just do the rough survey. We not really know much yet how it's going with that. And then BCST, we decided to start the monitoring program about the shorebird. And we saw the beautiful spoonbill sandpiper, or in short, I'm gonna call him Spoonie. And for this guy, we found like very cute. One thing's very cute. And also there are very important species in the world. And every year we can find about like 4 to 6 of Spoonie visit in our place. And some year we so lucky, we got about 16. That's why we know this area is quite important. That's why this area come up from this species. And we also find many beautiful birds visit our site too. And in total, we can find like more than 10,000 shorebirds visit Pak Tale area. So it's come up to our mind. But anyway, life is not go that easy. Because for the salt pan, it's quite a traditional way of the local farmer use it. But anyway, when the salt price is dropped, people decide to sell the land and they want to change to be a resort. They want to change to be the industrial. So that's why BCSC, we decide to buy this land by the crowdfunding. And also for many sort of people, in the end, we can get the Pak Tale Nature Reserve. I can say this is one of the projects that we can call non-protected area for the protected species. This is quite one of the starting project in our countries. But the thing, once we got this area, we got the salt pan, but the idea is like, okay, what we should do. So the first step that we try to do, as I said, this project is quite new. We just started like last year, 2020. First of all, we try to survey about the shorebird to understand about the diversity and the habitat preference, because we know different species have some habitat preference and they are very unique. Of course, that's right. We found like some pond, especially for the water storage, and the first pond evaporation is very important. And we can find like most shorebird use it for ranking and for the roosting. One of the reasons that we really think is a key component why most birds use this area. One thing is about it's quite low salt concentration. And another one is like it's plenty of food, because we have many benthic fauna in that area. And we also have another study related about that. I will share you later. So that's why this is our hypothesis, but we can see many cowbirds use it. But anyway, for the large warden, they pharynx in some places, but they use the salt pan for roosting too. And our highlight or the flagship species, we found like our spoonie, love the shallow one. And so that's why we keep in mind. That means one thing is about the water level and also how we can manipulate that. That's why it's come up to the next step. For the next step, it's about the habitat management. We try to restore this area. Once I talk about the restore in our case, because we quite new, we are the baby in this area, we try to start from something simple. It's about the water management that we call the water control. For the water control, we try to let the water in and water out. When I talk about water, it means about the seawater. And the thing that we find, you can see the photo on the top one. This is like before we do any water control. You can see the pond, the evaporation pond is look very dry. But once we manage the water, it's make things better, look more moisture, and it's make this one turn to be the semi-natural inland mud flat. So, and this is quite interesting because before I can say around this area, in the past, there was a wetland or the mangrove forest. But anyway, once for the life change, people utilize this way in different areas. But one thing is about the salt pan, but we try to keep this pond that is more bird friendly to maintain this population of the bird. Once we saw like when we can control about the water, we also have another thing that we do is about monitor about the shorebird and also some kind of the benthic fauna or the animal and on the surface underwater. And we also have a lovely team. They're from the university. They help us to do this survey. They find the benthos is so variety. But the most important thing is we try to identify what kind of this fauna relate to our shorebird. And we found like, for example, the crab and the small fish. They are the delicious food for the Chinese egret, the one on the left. And also for the Northman green shank, this is also one of our flagship species too, and we really focus on this one. They also love to eat the crab. So love to eat the crab. This is South Korea. I'm so sorry. That means the crab is their food and you like that. So that's why in this case, we know like different kinds of the shorebird also have different preference about the food and the habitat. So the main key finding about this project is we know at least the first step, we try to manage the area, to restore our area by to manage the water. We know like after to be the salt pan, once we manage the water, this can be the inland mud flat and can provide a habitat for the shorebird. This is one main finding. And also another main finding, like we do the before and after. But as I say, our project is just quite new. We just start from 1 year. We can have only one data set. And we found like the shorebird and the benthic fauna is increased significantly after we try to manage about water in and out. But anyway, once we try to do the conservation project to manage the area, we know another important part is about how to provide the benefit for the local communities. That's why we decide to exhibit the bird hive. And this one is can encourage people to know how important of this area by do the bird watching and also help the community to get more income. Why when I say talk about help the community, how we do that? It's like we know this area is very unique about the bird. and they can be a local guide to lead the people to do the bird watching. And apart from that, that's why we set it up as a park, Chale, Bird and the Nature Conservation Club. And moreover, we know like people really interested about the spoonie. That's why we try to make some merchandise like a t-shirt and something related about the shorebird. So another thing that I would like to share, we can do this kind of project. We cannot do it by ourselves. That's why we try to collaborate with the local community, but we know the government also a big part to play the role on the conservation. That's why now we develop shorebird networking group. This one be a part of the communities with the local government and also with the CSO. We try to do the networking. We try to have a plan together. That's why now even the government really interested about the shorebird. Once for a while, they not really care about this bird much. But at the moment, we have like a new step further. From this presentation, I would like to show you is about now we collaborate the work with the MCR. The MCR is the government sector. They call Department of Marine and the Coastal Resources. Our land is around this corner, but they still have another beautiful patch here. And then the MCR, they're really interested to work with us. We would love to develop the Center of the Shorebirds and the Coastal Ecosystem Learning Centers. And for this one thing that we plan to do together is we try to make the natural trail around this area to see how the habitat different and also maintain different kind of the habitat for the bird or other kind of the animal. And another thing for the next step this year, we would like to do more research is about the restoration. Because some part of the area you can see, this is like a mangrove forest. And anyway, they always have like a conflict between about the technique of the planting and the natural regeneration, or maybe we call NR. And this year, we will start to do this project to compare between the planting technique and the natural regeneration. So this is quite in general about what we're doing now. And this year, we try to do this because once we talk about the planting, as you know, normally we try to use the native species. But once we work with the government, sometimes they prefer some shortcut. They love to pick only some single species grow fast like a pioneer species. But for this project, we try to engage everyone to observe together and pick the way that we can restore the area together. So that's why we have around different aspects. And we really believe it, like apart just only conservation, we cannot keep it that long by only our organization. We know how to share the benefit with the local people, can make something more sustainable. That's why we really believe about sustainable coexistence between bird and people. Thank you, guys.
That was fabulous, Kim Min. Thank you so much. That's really, really good. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our presentations, and we have a series of really interesting questions. I want to start, and perhaps I'm going to start from, well, no, let me start from the top. David Griffith, you had a really good question about the role of restoration and natural regeneration, and whether we should actually let nature take its place. And then we will address the invasive species portion of it. I know, well, we all agree that we should not be using invasive species for restoration, but as Kim Min said, there are sometimes shortcuts that some restoration agencies are taking, and sometimes invasive species grow a lot faster. But we do have to keep an eye on making sure that restoration is done with native species, because we don't want to create more complicated problems for but Poshendra, maybe you can help me with with the first part of the question about how long would it actually take to, say, restore Europe? I think we're talking about probably 30 to 40 years, but you are the expert.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Although I don't have expertise in the restoration ecology, so I don't claim, but I think in terms of my experience and the literature I have read, I mean, it depends on the exact local socio-ecology of the particular region we are talking about. So it might take decades and even centuries to bring those degraded forests back to the natural state. Obviously, in terms of the different types of the natural regeneration methods, people talk about active regeneration, where we can plant some areas of native species where land is degraded, and also where there is obstruction in terms of recovering. And then there is another type called assisted natural regeneration, where we can encourage the forest to reestablish itself, but also in terms of handling these invasive species, we can remove them. Some kind of active management has to be done as well. Although we focus on some form of natural regeneration, but it has to be maintained as well. Also, sometimes we might have to provide some types of fencing as well to reduce grazing and other kind of the obstruction to the area which is being regenerated. And obviously, it depends on, as I mentioned, depends on the typical soil system condition, as well as the access to the particular place where the regeneration is happening. So we can also leave it to natural regeneration in those areas, which is obviously going to be more cost effective. But obviously, I mean, there is no single kind of solution to this problem. But as I mentioned, from the priority, I mean, we need to get the priority order right. So we need to conserve and preserve, existing forests or any ecosystem. And then in terms of the, the restoration as well, there are a suite of the kind of measures we can adopt, but it particularly depends on the local kind of soil and other conditions as well. So sorry, I just, can't give a proper answer.
No, I think it's an incredibly important point. The fact that restoration cannot be the same everywhere. It's not, a one size fits all type of solution. It heavily depends, not only in terms of the nature and the natural ecosystem that we're trying to restore, but how healthy the surroundings they are. Because if you don't have, and we will ping Andrés in a minute about the bridges in the Atlantic forest and address Mika's question. If you don't have healthy environment around, and this is one of the things that we're seeing actually in the Great Green Wall, you have to start from scratch, and you have to start with a lot of regeneration that helps maintain and build up the soils again. So then you can actually have healthy functional ecosystems later on. If you are actually taking on an area that is connecting areas around, then it's a little bit different, and it may happen a lot quicker. And maybe in some cases, natural regeneration actually works a lot better. And at one of the webinars that we had last year, we had Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the Minister of Environment of Costa Rica at that point, and now he's the Chief Executive of the Global Environment Facility. And he was talking about how in Costa Rica, just by generating an incentive to local farmers to enable them to restore their lands, they were able to promote a lot of natural regeneration that happened to be a lot faster and a lot healthier than just planting trees. But it heavily depends on where we are restoring and how healthy the environment around it is. So let's take it on from there from 1 second. And Andrés and Pepe, help me answer this question. How do we prioritize? In San Rafael, you showed a lot of gaps that need to be restored. In Misiones, we are tackling this bridge. How are we choosing the next space to do the restoration? Given that we have so little resources and resources are so limited, how do we prioritize? So Pepe, starting with you, and then Andrés, maybe we can talk a little bit more about the bridge.
Thank you for the question. It's very important to understand that the situation are very different, no? In San Rafael, it's very different to the Green Bridge in Argentina that Andrés will talk about it. But in San Rafael, the main problem is the security. We have no chances to restore area if we don't first try to address the security problem. We have a lot of security problems. We have in a year for politicians elections. So this year is very complicated. they are very, very growing of illegal issues, and behind the illegal issues, there are a lot of security problems. We are under menace and constant menace. Our rangers are very, very threatened. So we need to first attend the security problem. And for that, we are working with social issues, not for restoring properly the ecosystem. We are working in social issues through the yerba mate model as the first main product to develop legal programs in a social, economic style of life, way of life better than the illegal issues. That is our main priority, because I forgot, but also we have storms in the area, and in 2017 we had problem with a very, very big storm, and we have more than 200 hectares of forest that were very, very damaged by like a twister. It was a twister in the area. So there are a lot of trees without any canopy. It was a disaster. So, but in restoring works properly, we are promoting the natural regeneration first, because the Atlantic forest regenerate very fast. Thank you. Andrés?
Andrés?
Yes, to complement what Pepe said, one of the, okay, sorry.
Can you talk louder?
Yeah.
You're muted now, Andrés.
Here I am,
Yeah.
So to complement what Pepe said, well, first of all, I told you that there is official priority for restoration in Argentina, and fortunately, the map of Misiones province that overlap with the Atlantic forest is done first. So we have a roadmap. Second, there is two academic works that help us to find the priorities at plot levels. One related to micro corridors. In the peninsula, there is an academic approach that fix what are the best micro corridors to link the, well, to facilitate the fauna to live. And there is another work that is following showers. There was not a shower, there was a dog there. But there is another study that following showers, we have the satellite tracks that one of the showers, for example, was, remember that it's like a finger, it's a peninsula. So was in Brazil. The shower swim through the Iguazu River, goes to our Green Bridge, and then swims again through the Iguazu River and goes again to the Brazilian park. It's important, but because at this level, the Brazilian park is narrower. It's really very tiny, and the soybean crops start 3 kilometers far from the peninsula. So we have this scheme to prioritize the work that we have to do. Biodiversity and landscapes approaches.
Great, thank you, Andrés. Okay, so key role in terms of prioritizing, reconnecting and regenerating biodiversity to connect ecosystems. Let's move on to Thailand 1 second and talk about original vegetation. In the Paktale area, I mean, if we look back, I don't know, 50 years or more, that was mangrove areas, right? Kimin, and now they are salt pans. So we are using salt pans and managing those salt pans to ensure that we have safe places for migratory birds like the spoonies. But we're not bringing necessarily back the quote unquote natural area, are we? And how do we balance that?
Yeah, so I would like to say, as you mentioned before, this area was the mangrove forest. And also they still have some area, it's not exactly mangrove, but it looks like a pond. It's a kind of the wetland area, I can say. But anyway, once time changes, it means this turn to be the salt pan. In our thought, we think this is really challenging. That's why we try to manage the area. Some area it still look like a pond because we can see the bird. Probably, maybe bird have some adaptation to use this kind of the habitat because since we monitor, they all use the kind of the salt pan like a pond. But we also realize they also want to use some mangrove area too. That's why this is a challenging. That's why this year we try to make the ratio that work with the government and with the communities, how we can balance it. But another thing I can feel this is not only like in one area we can solve all the problem because once we talk about the migration first, it's mean about all along the flyway. For example, I can say probably the bird, they not really expect to go to the salt pan. They thought this is a pond. It's like a bird pond. So that's why they use this area. But because this pond is less the chemical uses, that's why they still can keep continue to use this. But I'm really sure anyway, once we have the human impact on something, they still affect on some other kind of the animal. I really sure that. So even I can say, even we try to protect this area, but in another part of the flyway, not really do any action, the result going to be the same. That's why we have a networking by the BirdLife that try to connect us together in different countries. So that's why I think this is one of the great opportunity. Once we are the partner between the country, we share the knowledge, we share the idea, and we try to make every step to go forward together. This is my point that I want to share.
Thank you, Kim Min. And I was actually going to say this, you guys are providing habitat that has been lost in other places for species like spoonbill sandpiper. And we're trying to reach that balance between the mangrove areas and the salt pans that will help us with the waders. And just to say, stay tuned because in a couple of months, we are going to launch a very big initiative for the East Asian Australasian Flyway. BCST is going to be part of it as well as all of the BirdLife partners and non-BirdLife partners in Asia, where we are we're working very hard with the Asian Development Bank, and we are hoping that we will be able to launch this in October at the Convention on Biological Diversity in Kunming. But stay tuned, it's a very big initiative to protect and restore the East Asian Australasian Flyway. And Paktale is one of the key sites that will be part of that process. So that's one of the advantages of working with the BirdLife family is that we look into the landscape and connect the sites of the flyway to make sure that we have safe places and safe havens like Paktale that can balance out some other areas that have been destroyed. But at the same time, looking into how that mosaic of salt pans and mangroves locally in Thailand play a key role of maintaining and restoring that nature. I want to move into Djibril and your work in the Great Green Wall, Djibril, because this is an extraordinary initiative and it's an incredibly ambitious initiative. And it's actually trying to connect those little patches of forest and natural vegetation that are still there, engaging the community. So let's talk a little bit more about the role of communities. I know that you answered Jack's question about how do we keep men and people in general in rural communities? How do we make it attractive? So let's start moving into the relationship with people. How do we see the Great Green Wall as a social benefit in the communities in the Sahel? How important it is the role of local communities in the restoration of these areas?
Thank you, Patricia, for the wonderful question. I think the community, the main objective of the Great Green Wall is how to make this rural area great for the communities. This is one of the objectives. So it's important to put communities on front of the action that we are doing on the field. One of the benefits is that without healthy environment, it's impossible for communities to stay on the rural areas. So we have to try to manage very well how to bring the best of the natural resources that we have in the rural areas, so that communities are in the heart of the activities. So if we want to succeed on restoration activities, we have to bring communities in the front. They have to be on the heart of our actions. So these are one of the reasons that we really work with communities. But as you know, we have different realities. When we look at outside of site levels, our main priority is to restore habitats. But this is not the realities at site levels, because communities are sometimes has been very affected with the desertification consequences. People are very poor, and the main priority for them is how to get something to eat right now, today. They are not wondering about restoration, the long-term issue, even though the two things are linked. So we have to support how communities can be safer today, so that they can lead us, they can support us in succeeding in habitat restoration. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think it is all about finding those benefits that help local communities not only champion our projects of restoration, but also see the value of an income, right? And this goes along all of the projects that we have been talking about. So in the Great Green Wall, we have everything from shea butter and empowering women to better agricultural products and enabling people to have fertile soils to be able to have their crops, to, you know, the yerba mate in the Atlantic forest, as you heard from Pepe and Andrés, and the tourism in Thailand that Kim Min was mentioning. And it is important to generate those opportunities of income. And right now that the governments of the world are looking at restoring and regenerating their economies after the COVID pandemic, we have an extraordinary opportunity to use restoration as an opportunity for generating jobs. It is something that some of the administrations have called a green economy, or a great bringing nature back. We are heavily working with national governments in Nigeria and in Singapore to test and pilot opportunities of promoting a green recovery and ensuring that we can generate additional jobs, putting nature at the heart of the solution. I want to go back to something that was mentioned at the beginning in terms of restoration and regeneration, and understanding that there is a fine balance between connecting and maintaining ecosystems and their and their dynamics. I want to ask Andrés and Pepe, and you guys, in the case of the Atlantic forest, we have been planning this project for quite some time. We have the generous support of the Jensen Foundation. We drew a whole map of trying to protect this area. We have incredible successes in Brazil. We have these extraordinary successes in Misiones. We have great progress in San Rafael, despite of all of the challenges and the political conflicts. But how do you see that? Have we been able to test the difference between natural regeneration and restoration, planting versus not planting, planting versus versus letting it happen? Andrés, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think that in Misiones province, in our Atlantic forest, we have a very good developed nature reserves system at national level and at provincial level, but it's not enough. Really, it's not enough. So we have to work in other places, and we can see with the technology at the moment how the impacts are attacking land, attacking nature. So restoration is other tool that complement the nature reserves program. Of course, a passive restoration, creating restricted places, is good and is easiest. But we have to engage people in conservation, and restoration is good for land, but it's really very clear and good for people. If you organize a tree planting, we are organizing a volunteer program and sponsor a local school in the peninsula to work with children, that we will reach the local farmers in our conservation and development progress. So two tools, not exclusive, no excluyentes.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to complement those issues, because restoration is great to engage people in conservation too.
Great. Pepe, I'll get to you, Kim, in a minute. Pepe, anything else?
Yes, because planting will ever present as a flag in this kind of works. When the people talk about restoration, all the society, I think in the world, not only in Paraguay, think about planting trees. We are working also with shorebirds. We are trying to restore the beaches, not forest. But people are thinking about planting trees. This is the only answer to restoration. So this is very important to awareness, so to the society. But it's not the answer to the practical restoration of the forest, because it's very, very expensive. We have no resource to restore only with planting trees. Think about the organic matter on the soil. We need to solve first the problem of organic matter, because a planting tree plot have not the same organic matter that the forest is putting every second on the soil. This is a very, very challenging issue that we need to solve, because we are talking about a very, very complex ecosystem. So, but planting trees ever will be present.
True.
Thank you.
Okay, Kiming, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I would like to share a bit. Before I work about the bird conservation, I was in the forest restoration research unit. And so that's why we developed different kind of the method for restore the forest. Like we talk about like ANR, we talk about the planting tree, we try to use the drone for the seed drain, something like that. But I mean, one of the challenging thing that we found now is like we try to do the role of the nature. But once we think about that, we have two dimensions. The first one is about the structure of that ecosystem. And another one is about the function of that ecosystem. I think these two main things is very important. And another thing, we did experiment like by planting, in some mountain in the northern of Thailand. And another one, we use like a kind of the NR technique, like let the nature try to resolve itself. We can find like mostly for the NR one, we got only the pioneer species, because we lack out of the seed disperser who can carry the rare species or the climax species into the field. It means maybe we can make the structure look like a forest, but maybe some function is gone. So that's why, this is the thing that I want to bring it up on the table. Because the rate of the deforestation is very high, sounds like we broke some kind of the mechanism. So once we want to restore the forest, it sounds more complicated at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. Okay, I want to answer one of the questions that is on the table about whether we work on urban centers. So BirdLife in Singapore and the BirdLife partner in Singapore, the Singapore Society for Nature are actually working together on this idea of how can we use a city-state as a pilot for a green recovery. When we're thinking about, or when the Singaporean government was thinking about green recovery, was basically targeting the energy element of the city. We are working with them to make sure that we are introducing key elements of restoration of nature and management of the really good reserves that they have in Singapore, to ensure that they become key stepping stones of the flyway, or are important biodiversity spaces for not only the people in the city, but for nature as well and species. So yes, there is a huge amount of experience in the BirdLife family working on urban areas, and it is part of the important element of restoring. Now that the population of the world is more urban than rural, we also have to think about maintaining that green environment in cities. So I want to leave a couple of minutes for you guys to do a final round and your final thoughts about why restoration is important and how do you see the BirdLife family working on this in the next 10 years. Next year, BirdLife is going to be celebrating our 100th anniversary, and we will be launching our new 10-year strategy. So your words of wisdom in terms of how we use restoration and the decade of restoration of the UN as an opportunity for positioning the family, but for also bringing nature and people together and much more closely together. So I'm going to start from the end going back. So Kim-Min, let's start with you.
Okay, I feel like one of the most important thing about the restoration or even about anything related about the environmental issue is beyond the country border. That means the great thing is like we have a partner between the countries. That's why we can make a movement happen. Because as you know, like for the flyway, as I mentioned, if I make some effort, it's just some small sport. But if other places is not really do any action, anything cannot happen. And another thing I can feel like it's great that we are the part of the communities because we can do the knowledge sharing. Today, I learned a lot from many places in the world, and I can pick this. It's like a take-home messages that I would like to share with my people. So that's why I feel this is a great challenging for the next step that we do the collaboration, work beyond the border. I think this is the most important thing I want to share.
Sorry, my mute button got stuck. Thank you so much for that. Djibril, your words of wisdom.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think I would like to share two key elements. The first one is we need to focus on communication and sensibilization. We are a great family as BirdLife, but the task is very huge when we talk about desertification and land restoration. We need to spread our message around us. Communities need to be involved. The second element is that we need exactly. It's true that research is good, science is really moving, but let's not forget about valuing local communities' knowledge. That is the two key elements that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know why my mute button is getting stuck. That's great. Thank you so much, Djibril. Pepe?
I have a lot of wisdom, but the main issue I think is the basis of quid pro quo. I help you and you help me. That is our basis we are talking about a social contract, a social compromise. So our dream is that we can develop all the buffer zone with agroecological business and more attractive than illegal issues. And all the people also help us to restore the Atlantic forest, even planting a tree or something. Just one action from them is very, very enough for us. There are a lot of issues, technical issues. There are a lot. We know what we need to do, but without social support, we cannot do anything. That is the problem, the main problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrés?
Only an information.
No se te escucha, loco.
Okay. Do you listen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am at Iguazu City at the moment. Can you imagine that in Iguazu, that we have the forest, in the city, we have no water at the moment, and most of the city has no water. And this is due to the deforestation of the Atlantic forest, mainly in Brazil. first. And there is a question in the chat that says, what about the relationship between human beings and nature? Okay, would be a lot of webinars to answer this, but there is a folk music in Argentina that is called Atahualpa Yupanqui that says, in English we say, the man is earth that walks. The man is earth that walks. So this is why we have to build green bridges between people and nature to save this part of lands and this part of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrés. And it is crazy that you're in Iguazu Falls, in Iguazu City, and you don't have any water. It's absolutely insane.
Incredible.
Poshendra, let's close it there.
Okay, thank you. So I think in terms of the, I see that there is a potential, and unique opportunity as BirdLife, having more than 115 countries around the world as our partners. There is a unique opportunity to connect between different scales. So, we can increase, obviously, UN decade and ecosystem restoration is a global policy, but it has to be operationalized at the national scale and local levels. So I think that as BirdLife, we can facilitate connecting different skills from global to local. And I think, and it can work both ways. We can bring some of the local voices as well to the global platforms. And I think last week in webinar, there was a mention about how local communities also bear the brunt of ecosystem degradation, and they also bear the burden of ecosystem restoration. So I think we need to bring those voices from the ground as well, starting with the indigenous people, girls, women, and underrepresented groups as well. And we can bring those voices as well. So we need to, we can use our partnership for this connection between different skills. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. And the construct of the BirdLife family that is so unique is an extraordinary opportunity of really connecting the dots, learning from different experiences, applying different skills and success stories to different parts of the world. So that's what we are doing, and making sure that we're using the flyways and our work on restoration of ecosystems very closely together. Okay, we're on time right now. I want to thank all of you for joining us from Thailand, where it's very late, to the Americas, to Paraguay and Argentina. And a huge thanks to Djibril and your great expertise in the Sahel. Poshendra, it's fantastic to have you and with all of your experience at the global level. I hope that you guys have enjoyed the webinar. We've loved having you. Please stay tuned. Our next webinar is in July, where we will be launching the Champions of the Flyway, our fantastic program led by the Israel partner, the Society for the Protection of Nature of Israel, but that actually brings the family together. It is going to be a very interesting one about following the line of the illegal killing of birds and how important it is to maintain hunting quotas in check. So stay tuned. We don't have a final date yet. We're trying to finalize that, but it will be most likely between the 2nd and 3rd week of July. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much for your very interesting questions and for participating in all of this. Thanks to the members of the family, of the BirdLife family, from Myanmar to I see Tunisia and Argentina and Brazil. But also for those of you who are our supporters and our donors, thank you so much for being there. You help us make this work. Without your support, we cannot make any of this happen. So keep joining us, keep supporting us, keep spreading the word, keep telling people about BirdLife. We want more of you closer to us. With that, Sarah, I'm not sure if I need to say anything else, but we are 2 minutes over time. So I will leave it there, and we'll send the invitations for the next webinar shortly. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. You guys were a fabulous, fabulous panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.